Now, you have to understand, Frankenstein did not come out of nowhere. Mary Shelley did not simply wake up, invent a monster, and hand the world a nightmare. No, the question was already waiting. Can human hands make life? Can they call it back? Can they steal the spark and get away with it? We are going to follow that question a long way. Back to clay bodies and bronze servants. Back to golems, secret letters, furnaces, jars, and little impossible creatures promised in bottles. Then the room gets colder. Bodies are opened. Graves are watched. Drowned people are pulled from the water, and everyone has to ask, is this person gone or not quite gone? And then comes electricity, the invisible fire, the twitching frog, the dead man's eye. By the time Mary Shelley sits with that old dream in the summer of 1816, the world has been preparing her story for centuries. So listen closely. The creature is coming, but first we have to see all the hands that reached for life before Victor Frankenstein ever raised his own. Chapter 1. The question before the creature. Before Frankenstein, before the laboratory, before that poor creature opened his eyes, there was already a question waiting in the room. Could we make life? Could we call it back after death? Could we find the secret spark inside the body and take hold of it? Mary Shelley did not invent that question. She gave it one answer, a famous one, after centuries of people asking. Because the wish was older than the tools. That is the first thing to hold on to. A parent at a bedside, a ruler dreaming of power, a mourner staring at a body that still looked almost asleep. They did not need wires, engines, or laboratories to want the impossible. They only needed loss, pride, wonder, and that aching thought. Surely life must be somewhere close. So the question fixed itself on one small, terrible border. A chest rises, then it does not. A hand is warm, then cooling. A mouth answers your name, then gives back only silence. In ordinary life, that line seems plain enough. Living here, dead there. But stand beside it long enough, and it starts to blur. What exactly left, and where did it go? Before anyone had the tools to try it, people could still try it safely in the mind. Around fires, in temples, in whispered stories, they ask the dangerous thing out loud. What if a person made life? What if the dead answered back? Now, you have to understand, imagination was not childish here. It was the first workshop, and fear kept the door half open. And then, slowly, the question moved from the story circle to the table. Not because anyone had mastered life, no, but hands were doing new things now. Bodies could be opened, watched, kept from decay for a little while. Parts could be moved, arranged, tested. The old dream had not become an answer, but it had found something close enough to touch. So the body began to look less like a closed shrine and more like a locked box. Still holy to many, still frightening, yes, but maybe the key was inside it, in the twitch of a nerve, in the pull of a muscle, in breath leaving and returning, in the strange order that made separate parts move as one. That was the dangerous turn. Life might be hidden in matter. Now, you can feel the pieces drawing together, the old tales of life shaped by human hands, the older hope that death might open just once and give someone back. The table, the knife, the watched body, and then these strange new forces, invisible but powerful. Different roads, yes, different languages, but all of them circling one question. What makes the dead stay dead? So no, Frankenstein does not matter because lightning struck one lonely imagination. It matters because Mary Shelley caught an old dangerous question as it passed through her century and she gave it a new body, a modern body, a terrifying one. And next we go backward to find what fed that question: the myths, the graves, the watched corpses, and the spark itself. Chapter 2: Life Shaped from Earth. Now we turn back, far back, to the first version of that dream, before laboratories, before wires, before the name Frankenstein ever had a shadow. People were already asking it, quietly and nervously, if hands can shape a body from earth, from dust, from wet clay, what makes it more than a thing? And the oldest answer was never just the body. It was breath, spirit, a sacred spark entering the made shape. So start with the dirt underfoot. That is the first strange thing. Not gold, not stars, not some rare heavenly metal. Dust, soil, mud after rain, clay pressed in the hand, the same stuff that grew food, swallowed the dead, stuck to sandals, and waited outside every door. Of course people looked at it and wondered. Maybe we began there. Now the hands enter the story. A maker bends close to the ground and gathers that wet, stubborn earth, presses it, turns it, smooths a shoulder, hollows a mouth, draws out fingers one by one, and there it is, almost shocking, a human shape. Not alive, no, not yet, just clay arranged like a person, waiting in the silence after the work of shaping. And that is where the potter matters, because a potter does not discover a bowl hiding in the mud. No, the potter decides what the mud will become. Push here, pull there, open a hollow, give it a rim. Now make that vessel a body, a chest, a face, and the craft turns strange. In ancient sacred stories, that kind of shaping starts to look like divine authority. So we go older now, back into the sacred stories of the ancient Near East. There, humankind is not a trick or a laboratory marvel. It is made inside an order already ruled by the gods. A divine craftsman shapes the figure, yes, but the real turn comes when breath, spirit, some holy force enters it. That is the old pattern, formed matter, awakened by heaven. But then the Greek story tilts the lamp a little. Here comes Prometheus, remembered not just as the fire thief, but as a maker shaping human beings from earth, from clay. Now, you have to understand, this is not creation safely inside the God's own order. This is clever hands near forbidden power. The body is formed, yes, but the maker is already leaning across a line. And that is the thing to pause over. In story after story, the work can seem finished before it is finished. The limbs are there, the face is there, the shape can almost fool you, but almost is the key word. Something is still waiting outside the clay, outside the craft. The body has been made, yes, but life has not yet answered. So here is the old pattern, plain at last. Hands can press the earth into a body. Skill can give it arms, a mouth, a face that seems ready to answer. But the last step does not belong to craft. It comes as breath, as spirit, as sacred force entering from beyond the maker's fingers. That is when shaped matter stops waiting, and a human life begins. Chapter 3: The Servants of Hephaestus. Now step with me into a different kind of making. Not a riverbank, not soft clay in mortal hands, but the bright, dangerous workshop of Hephaestus. Here bronze remembers the hammer, gold takes a curve, wheels wait under tables, hinges hold their little secrets, and motion, listen now, does not have to arrive as a soul. It can be built for a purpose. And there they are beside him, not wives, not daughters, not statues waiting for some holy spark. Golden young women, made by his own art, moving toward their limping master when he needs them. They speak, they understand, they know how to help. Now, you have to understand the leap here. These are servants built for service, with minds taught by the gods, and hands ready for work. That is why they matter, not because Hephaestus has somehow made ordinary girls in a stranger way. No, their strangeness is the point. Gold should sit in cups, crowns, temple gifts, but here it answers the door. Here it steadies a god's body. Here, in the house of Olympus, made things are given a proper place at work, doing what living attendants would do. And Hephaestus does not stop with golden helpers shaped like people. He makes tripods too, little tables on wheels, and listen to what they do. They roll by themselves into the gathering of the gods, do their part there, and then roll back home again. No face, no voice, no pretending to be alive, just a path, a duty and motion built into the thing itself. Now, that is a different wonder from the Golden Girls. The girls make us ask whether a made body can stand beside a god like a servant. The tripods ask something plainer and maybe stranger. Can a thing simply go where it is needed? No face, no speech, no little soul peeking out. Just movement timed correctly, carrying service from room to room. So now we leave the warm rooms behind. No cups, no feasts, no helpful table rolling back into place. We come to Crete, to the edge of the island, where the job is harder. Talos is bronze, huge, and made to patrol. Round and round he goes, keeping strangers off the shore. This is service too, but sharpened into warning, into force, into a body built to say, no farther. Now, here is the trick inside the terror. Talos is not strong the way an animal is strong. His power runs through him. One channel, carrying the stuff that keeps him going, sealed shut down at the ankle with a little fastening. Think about that. A bronze giant circling a whole island, and all of him depends on one place staying closed. And that is where the chapter has been leading us. The golden handmaids help beside the fire. The wheeled tables know their errand and roll away. Talos guards the shore, fierce as a wall, until the secret inside him is opened. Different shapes, yes, different jobs. But listen closely. Each one is made around a purpose, not merely alive, built to serve. Chapter 4. The gift that would not stay simple. So at first, this feels simple enough. A made thing is useful. You shape it for a task. You arrange its hands, its feet, its little habits around what you want done. Carry this, guard that, move when told. But now you have to understand, there is a thin line here, because what happens when the made thing does not just serve? What happens when it seems to look back and answer? Now place that question in a quieter room, with a sculptor and a figure of ivory. He is not making a servant. He is not building a guard. He is shaping the person he wishes the world had given him. Every line carries wanting. Every touch says, answer me. And little by little, the statue stops feeling like an object admired from outside, and starts feeling like someone almost near enough to love. And then, at last, the impossible kindness happens. Warmth enters the ivory. The hard surface gives way to skin. The beloved figure breathes, and the wish is answered. But listen closely, because this is where the story turns. A living woman is not a finished sculpture with a pulse. She can answer, she can want, she can need. And suddenly his triumph has become a responsibility. Now step away from that private room. Here the workshop is not lonely at all. The gods are gathered around the workbench. One gives beauty, one gives charm, one gives skill with the hands, One gives a voice that can persuade. Gift after gift is pressed into her, and that matters. She is not made because one heart was aching. She is made to enter the world and change it. Now, you have to understand, these are not little decorations. Beauty opens the door, charm keeps it open, curiosity makes her reach, persuasion makes others lean closer, presence makes the whole room rearrange itself around her. Lovely gifts, yes, dangerous gifts too, because before she has chosen a single path, other hands have already placed a map inside her. So when Pandora steps into human life, she does not simply arrive. That is the trick. A new person stands there, smiling, speaking, asking, being welcomed, and the air around everyone changes. Doors open that might have stayed shut, questions wake up, trust shifts, desire shifts, and hidden inside this beautiful arrival is a disturbance made on purpose, already beginning to do its work. And then the vessel opens, not with thunder, not with some grand speech, just opened, and out come the things no one can flatter back inside: sickness, grief, hunger, quarrels, fear in the dark. Now listen carefully. This is not just Pandora did wrong. It is sharper than that. A life made for a purpose has carried consequences no maker can neatly hold. So there it is. One made body answers longing, and then stands as someone who must be met, not owned. Another is shaped with gifts, welcomed in, and the world is never the same again. Now, you have to understand, that is the old warning. To make life is not just to make movement, it is to release a presence into history. Chapter 5. Prometheus Steals the Spark. Now set Pandora down for a moment and look at the people below. Bare skin in the wind, raw food in the hand, darkness pressing close every night. The great powers keep the bright things above, where mortals can see them but not use them. No cooking fire, no hardened tool, no safe circle after sunset. Not just cold, you understand, small, kept small. And among those bright powers, there is one who does not quite fit. Prometheus. A titan, yes, old blood. Close enough to the high halls to hear what the gods say when mortals are not supposed to hear it, but his eyes keep dropping downward to the shivering hands, to the dark huts, to the hunger. That sympathy is dangerous because he understands both sides. Now, this is the line that matters. Fire is not lying around like a fallen branch, waiting for any clever hand. Fire belongs above. It is watched. It is a sign of rank, like a crown, like a locked door. The gods may change raw things into cooked things, dark into light, or into tools. Mortals may wait, and shiver, and need. So Prometheus moves, quietly, quickly, with the kind of calm that means the choice is already made. He takes the guarded flame from its place above and hides it close, a little living brightness where no mortal hand was ever meant to reach. Then down he goes, down past the line, down to the cold huts, and there, for the first time, what belonged to the gods begins to burn for human beings. And listen to what changes first. A hard root softens in the coals. Meat stops being a struggle and becomes a meal. Clay pots toughen. Bent metal learns a new shape. At night, the dark no longer owns every doorway. A hut with flame inside is warmer, safer, braver. No, mortals have not become gods, but their hands reach farther than they did yesterday. Now, over time, people remember Prometheus as more than the one who stole fire. That matters. In some tellings, he stands close to the very shaping of human beings, as if his hands were there near the clay, near the first breath. So he gathers two shadows at once, helper and maker, the one who gives humans power, and the one imagined beside their beginning. But now comes the other half of the gift. Zeus does not shrug and let the theft become a victory parade. The old order answers. Prometheus is chained, held fast, made into a warning with a living body. Down below, people cook, warm themselves, shape the world a little better. Up there, the giver pays. That is the sting of it. Fire is won, yes. Consequence is not mastered. So that is the old pattern, plain as a scar. Prometheus crosses the line and wins the fire. He really does. Humanity is changed by it. But listen closely. Winning the power is not the same as ruling what comes after. The judgment still comes. The pain still comes. The maker, the helper, the thief of heaven cannot command the cost. Chapter 6. Talking Heads and Learned Magicians. Now the story steps out of Olympus and into colder rooms. Stone walls, ink-stained fingers, men arguing over books by candlelight. And here the old dream changes clothes. The helper is no longer forged by a god. It is whispered about in the study of Albertus Magnus, a speaking head, made by learning, made by secret art, matter coaxed until it almost obeys. And notice the shape of the wish now. Not iron arms, not a tireless back, a head, brass, sometimes bronze, sometimes just mysterious metal, sitting there like a secret with a mouth. People said it could answer questions, tell what was hidden, speak when no human teacher would. That is the shiver here. The scholar makes a thing, and the thing speaks back. Now, in some versions, the terror is not that the head lies. It tells the truth. That is worse, because the answer comes at the wrong hour, or in words too strange, or while the tired watcher is half asleep. Roger Bacon's legend leans hard on that sting. The marvel has worked, the door has opened, and still the human hand misses the moment. So the stories fasten themselves to a name people knew. Albertus Magnus. Albert the learned, Albert the almost too clever. And what does that reputation buy him? A servant, of course. A made thing in the room, ready to answer, ready to obey, as if books and secret craft could stock a household with life. Now, that sounds useful. To anyone else watching, it sounds dangerous. And here is where the clever little wonder stops being private. In some Albert stories, another scholar sees the servant and cannot bear it. Maybe it talks too much. Maybe it moves when it should not. Maybe it simply feels wrong in a learned man's house. So he breaks it, just like that. One man's proof of mastery becomes another man's alarm bell. So the tale grows larger, and it finds Roger Bacon, not just a scholar with a strange device in a room, but a man tied to England's fate. His brazen head is said to speak counsel that could guard the country, maybe even change its history. But listen to the trap. Making the voice is not enough. The scholar must hear the right words at the right moment, or all that power slips past him. Now the fear is bigger than one broken servant or one missed prophecy, because these stories are asking a sharper question. If a scholar can read the right books, learn the right tongues, polish the right instrument, and make dead matter answer back, then what exactly has study become? Not wisdom, maybe. Not harmless cleverness. Maybe it has stepped into the old forbidden place, where making belonged to gods, giants, and holy power. So we leave the brazen heads behind. Let the metal cool. Let the scholar close his books. The wish has survived. Yes, the old dream of a servant made by human hands, ready to answer, ready to obey. But now the road bends. The next question is not, What clever device can make matter speak? It is quieter and stranger. What holy words might wake earth itself? Chapter 7. The Unfinished Shape Called Golem. Now, you have to understand, golem did not first mean a clay servant stomping through the streets. Not yet. The word begins in a stranger place. It points to a body that is there. Yes, something you could almost name, but it is not finished, not awake in the full human way. A shape, a lump, a person only in promise, waiting for the last sacred thing. In Psalm 139, the word sits close to a secret. The speaker says God saw him when he was still unformed, before the world had any use for him, before anyone could point and say, there he is. That is the first feeling of golem here. Not a monster, not a worker, a body in the making, held in divine sight, still waiting for breath. And that matters, because the Bible does not picture the first body as a clever device. No gears, no hidden engine, no smith hammering out a human thing in a workshop. It begins lower than that. Dust, ground, plain earth underfoot. The body is shaped from what everyone steps on, but shaped earth is still only shaped earth until something holy crosses that little gap. So linger there a moment. Earth can be pressed together. Clay can take a curve, a shoulder, a face. A hand can smooth it until it almost answers back. Almost. Now, you have to understand that almost is the whole doorway. Form is not life. Shape is not a soul. The body may stand near the human, terribly near, and still be only gathered earth. And the missing thing is named plainly, breath. Not a trick breath, not bellows in a chest, not some clever push of air through a clay throat. God's breath, that is the line Scripture draws. The body is formed, yes, but life arrives as a gift. Now, you have to understand, that changes everything. The great question is not who shaped the figure. It is who can make it live. So there it is, the gap you can almost miss because the likeness is so strong. A head, hands, weight, shadow. It can stand where a person stands. It can seem to wait. But inside, nothing has crossed over yet. No inward spark. No living self looking back. The golem, at this first moment, is not a servant. Not yet. It is unfinished matter held right at the edge. And now the old idea begins to lean forward. Carefully, though, we are not in the later stories yet. No rabbis whispering names, no letters placed like keys, no earth rising at a command, but you can feel why those stories become possible. If the body waits there, shaped but unfinished, then sacred knowledge starts to look like the thing someone might reach for. Not craft, not machinery, something holier and far more dangerous. So leave it there for a moment, not marching, not guarding a gate, not obeying some master's hand, just shaped earth, shaped close enough to trouble the heart, but still earth all the same. That is the beginning. The golem starts as almost human matter, waiting for something no chisel can give it, something sacred, something beyond ordinary making. Chapter 8. Letters that make a body rise. Now look at that body again. It has the outline, yes, arms, legs, a face close enough to make you pause, but it is still only waiting, not weak, not asleep, empty. The problem is not that the hands were shaped badly, or that the chest needs breath. No, the missing thing is stranger. Someone must know how holy words can do more than mean. They can make. Now, you have to understand, in this tradition, a letter was not just a mark on a page. A letter could be a little piece of creation itself. Aleph, Bet, Every holy shape and sound mattered, not because ink is magic, because the world could be imagined as ordered through them. Letters were the deep tools, the sacred building blocks by which form first learned how to be. But not any order would do. That is the thing. A holy letter in the wrong place was only a letter. Pair it with the right one, turn it, set it beside its partner, speak it in the proper sequence, and now you were touching a pattern older than you. This was careful work, slow work. One change, one slip, and the door stayed shut. And even then, listen, the letters were not enough by themselves. The person touching them had to be ready. Trained, yes, but also clean in the old sense, set apart. Fasting, washing, praying, keeping the mind steady and the heart low, because sacred speech was not a trick you performed on the world. In the wrong hands, it went silent. In careless hands, it could burn. So now the idea begins to harden into a rite. Not just think the letters, say them, step with them, turn through one group, then another, join a name, separate it, breathe, begin again. In some old pietist stories, learned men do exactly this, circling the silent form with guarded words. It starts to look possible, yes, but only inside the fence. And sure enough, stories begin to gather around that fence. Not the grand legends yet, smaller, older tales. Medieval Jewish pietists speak of learned men testing the holy names, shaping something like a person through care, purity, and exact words. Now, you have to understand, that matters. The letters have stepped out of thought and into practice. The question is no longer only, could creation be spoken? It is, who is worthy to try? So the point is not, look, someone has made a handy little servant. That would be too small. In these stories, the figure is almost a sign left behind by the real event. The real event is the maker. Has he studied enough, purified himself enough, come close enough to the hidden fire without being burned? That is the test. The body only proves how near he has dared to stand. And there it is. The old body has changed its meaning. It is no longer just clay waiting in silence for heaven to breathe. Around it now is a path, letters placed with care, order kept, the self made clean, the rite performed, the learning tested. Not common magic, no, not a trick for crowds, but something stranger, something a trained soul might dare to approach. Chapter 9. The Rabbi Who Made a Servant. So now the tale does something important. It gives us a name. Rabbi Elijah of Kelm, a rabbi in 16th century Poland, becomes one of the earliest Jewish figures tied to the making of a golem. Not some far-off wizard, not a rumor with no house around it. Kelm remembers him. Later tellings, even in the 18th century, keep his name there, standing before the servant he has made and must answer for. Now, Chelm matters here. You have to feel that. This is not a misty mountain or some nameless old ruin. It is a Jewish town with a community that knows who teaches, who judges, who carries weight. And Elijah is not powerful because he waves his hands in the dark. He is powerful because people know him as learned. That is why the story can place the impossible at his door. That is the hinge. Elijah can stand in this story because learning has weight. People do not imagine clay rising for just anyone, not for a showman, not for some clever stranger passing through town. For a rabbi, yes, maybe. For a man steeped in holy words, law, memory, and danger, the servant becomes thinkable. His knowledge is the door the tale opens. And what comes through that door is not a philosopher's puzzle anymore. It is a servant. Picture that carefully. a body shaped like a man, made by Elijah, able to lift, carry, labor, obey. Strong, yes. Useful, yes. But not a neighbor, not someone's son. No voice in the town, no family calling him home. He belongs to the Maker's command. Now that silence is the thing to hold on to. The servant can move a stone, carry a load, do the hard work of 10 tired men, and that matters. It has force. It can change the world around it. But it cannot answer. It cannot argue. It cannot say, I choose this. So it stands at the edge of personhood, useful and troubling, waiting for command. And then the trail does something important. It does not stop in Chelm. Through the 18th century, writers and tellers pick up Elijah's name and pass it on. One hand to another, one page to another, the claim stays alive. This earlier rabbi made a golem. Now, people argue over what that means, of course, but they are still arguing about him. Now, that is not the same as everyone simply nodding and saying, yes, yes, a miracle happened. The later tellers keep the story, but they turn it in their hands. What kind of making was this? What kind of danger? What kind of proof? So Elijah is not only remembered, he is examined, and behind the questions, the silent servant is still standing there. So leave the argument there for a moment and look at the room. There is Rabbi Elijah, not as a rumor now, but as a man facing what his own hands have brought forward. Before him stands the servant, strong, silent, waiting, and that is the whole weight of it. If it remains because Elijah commands it. If it stops because he has the restraint to stop it. Chapter 10. The command hidden in the mouth. Now, hold that picture. Elijah before the thing he has shaped. It is not wandering. It is not wondering. It is standing there, ready in the most troubling way a body can be ready. Because readiness is not life. Not yet. Something has to be laid upon it. Some mark, some word, some rule from outside, telling those heavy limbs what obedience means. Now, you have to understand, the terrible part is not that the servant can move. The terrible part is how simply it can be made to move. A word set upon it, a mark shaped where eyes can read it, a formula spoken over clay and breath. That sign becomes the handle. Turn it one way, the body rises. Change it, and the same body falls still again. And here is the line you must not step over too quickly. The servant can carry the basket. It can fetch water. It can stand at a door all night and frighten away anyone foolish enough to test it. But ask it why, and there is no why. Ask what might happen next, and nothing answers back. The body obeys, yes. The voice has not arrived. That is where the old lesson bites. Making obedience is not the same as making judgment. Tell the servant, fill the barrels, and it may fill them after the fire is out, after the room is flooding, after the door has swollen shut. It does not pause and say, wait, master, the world has changed. It only hears the order still ringing. Now the blame begins to move, not to the clay hands, not to the stiff little mind inside them, but back to the one who shaped them. If the servant keeps pouring after the need is gone, whose fault is that? The order was useful once, then the room changed, and the maker, the real maker, must know when to stop what he has set loose. And that now is the hard part. The maker cannot point at the servant and say, look what it chose. It did not choose, it obeyed. So the maker must step in, even against his own command. Stop the hands, break the word. Undo the thing if undoing is all that is left. Because command is not life, and blame cannot be breathed back into clay. Now, a careful step. The Prague story feels close to Frankenstein. Yes, a maker, a made body, a terrible lesson, but Mary Shelley's book came in 1818, and the famous Prague version we know was gathered into shape later. So it cannot be the simple source, not honestly. Still, keep the comparison. It asks the same sharp question: is obedience really life? So leave him there for one last breath, the maker before the shaped body, with the word in his hand. He can wake it, he can still it, he can make its feet cross the room and make those same feet stop. But now you have to understand that is power over motion, not proof of life. The question walks out with us. When obedience has no judgment inside it, what exactly has been made? Chapter 11. The alchemists enter the workshop. So we step away from the legend, but we do not drop its trouble. A body that obeys can frighten you because it almost looks alive. Almost. And that little gap is where the next story begins. Not with holy names, not with whispered commands, but with hands. Hands touching clay, metal, glass, flesh, whatever would bend, harden, melt, or change under human work. Step inside then, not a temple now, not a tale told over a sacred page. A room, a bench rubbed dark by work, little knives, cups of powder, jars with cloudy bottoms, crucibles blackened by heat, stains everywhere, because stains remember what hands forget. Here, knowledge is not commanded into motion. It is tried and tried again, with fingers, fire, and things prepared just so. And the furnace, now, that was not just a warm corner of the room, it was a hand of its own if you knew how to use it. A low heat could coax a thing to soften, a hotter breath could blacken it, make it run, make it smoke. Watch closely, and matters seem to answer back, changing shape under attention, waiting for the right vessel to hold the change. So the eye moves from the miracle body to the pot, the cup, the sealed little flask. Put something inside, and now the change has a room to happen in. It steams against the lid, it sinks to the bottom, it forms a crust, or splits into layers, or paints a pale ring on the wall. That mark says, look here, something happened, and you can watch it happen again. Then came metal, and metal looked like the final argument. Heavy, cold, stubborn. Iron did not seem like something that listened, but put it in the fire long enough, and now it glowed. Strike it, and it yielded. Melt one metal into another, and a new strength appeared. Roast ore, skim dross, polish a dull face bright. Even hardness had begun to look negotiable. And after metal, the eye gets sharper. Not smaller in spirit, mind you, just sharper. A pinch of salt disappears in water, then comes back as bright little points. A yellow powder reddens in heat. A washed stone leaves a white skin behind. Mineral color stains the fingers, darkens in the pan, pales as it dries. Now change is not only hammered out, it is traced grain by grain. So the thought creeps in, quiet but powerful. What if nature is already doing this, only slowly? Underground, minerals ripen in darkness, seeds swell, fruit softens, leaves rot back into earth. Nothing is still, not really. And the worker at the bench says, well then, perhaps fire, water, grinding, and patient hands can help the world finish its own work faster. And that is where we leave it, for now. Not with a corpse called up by holy command, not with life made from nothing. No, we leave it over a vessel, hot in the hands, where the same powder darkens, pales, separates, returns, again and again. Now transformation has witnesses, it has tools, it has a place to happen while human eyes are watching. Chapter 12. The Stone, The elixir and the locked door. Now the new chapter begins right there, with the vessel sealed and sweating in the heat. Inside, the stuff is not behaving like dead stuff at all. It blackens, it thickens, then it lightens, flakes, runs, gathers again, and everyone watching feels that little pull in the chest. Because if matter can change like this, in front of them, maybe life has a hidden door too. Now, you have to understand, this changed how they saw the world. Lead was not just lead. Iron was not simply iron. These were things still on the road, still young, still rough around the edges. And gold was matter grown up at last, finished, perfected. Nature, they thought, was always trying to get there, slowly, deep underground. So they imagined a key, not a jewel, not a charm for kings, but a material so pure it could wake up the perfection hiding inside rough metal. The philosopher's stone, they called it. Touch lead with it, and nature's slow underground labor might happen in a breath. And now the dangerous thought arrives. If it could mend matter, what might it do to flesh? Well, they did not stop at metal. Of course they did not. If sickness was a kind of dirt in the body, a wrongness, an imbalance, then maybe the same perfect substance could set that right too, cleanse the bad humors, strengthen the weak blood, warm the failing flesh, not defeat death, not yet, but restore life where it had begun to fray. So the dream took one more step, make that perfected power small enough to swallow. A draught, a powder in wine, an elixir. Now, you have to understand, this was not just wanting to live forever, not at first. It was the hope that the body could be tuned again, kept in balance, kept bright, while age and rot waited outside the door a little longer. And here the stone and the elixir become one dream, not two, because if metal could be brought to perfection, and a body could be brought back toward strength, then maybe both were obeying the same hidden rule. One key tucked under everything. Find the right likeness, the right secret sympathy, and matter might rise, flesh might mend, life itself might answer. So of course they hid it, not because there was nothing there. That is the easy laugh, the modern laugh. No, in their world, a thing this strong had to be guarded. So they wrote in suns and moons, kings and brides, dragons eating their tails. Recipes became riddles, instructions bent sideways. The ordinary reader saw fog. The insider was meant to see a locked door. And after years of seeing colors bloom in the glass, metals soften, vapors vanish and return. Can you blame them? The world kept changing right in front of their faces. The elixir promised renewal. The books whispered, then hid their mouths. Put it together, and the secret of life did not feel like a fairy tale. It felt like a locked room, and somewhere, surely, a key. Chapter 13. A little man in a bottle. Then Paracelsus walks in. And now, you have to understand, this was not some tavern dreamer muttering over a candle. This was a famous doctor, a man people read because he sounded like he knew where the hidden levers were. And in his writings, the old question changes shape. Life is no longer only something you hunt for in nature. It becomes something you might make, step by step, if you knew the procedure. Here is the turn. Paracelsus is not saying, go find life hiding under a stone. He is saying, prepare the stuff, seal it away, warm it, tend it, keep your hands on the process long enough, and something living may be brought forth, not discovered, not coaxed from a secret spring, made by matter, method, patience, and human art. So the first real move is not a spark, or a spell, or some thunderclap from heaven. It is a vessel, a glass one, prepared and closed off. That matters because inside that little wall of glass, the ordinary world is held back. No street dust, no open air, no wandering chance. The container becomes a kind of made womb, a place where the claim can finally be pictured. And what goes into that vessel? Not a holy word, not a breath from some invisible world. Something far more troubling and far more concrete, human bodily matter. That is the beginning of the recipe. Paracelsus makes the claim start there, in fleshly stuff, in the material trace of generation itself. The creature is not dreamed into being. It is supposed to begin from the body, then be rerouted through art. Now comes the quiet demand. The glass is not just set aside and wished into power. It has to be kept warm, steadily warm. That is the trick of it. Not one flash of fire, not a magician's sudden blaze, but a held condition, day after day. Heat becomes the substitute embrace, the maiden closure, the false womb around a beginning that is trying to happen without ordinary birth. And then the strangest part is how ordinary the work becomes. Someone has to tend it. Someone has to keep coming back, checking the warmth, guarding the vessel, making sure the little world inside does not cool or fail. Weeks pass, more waiting, more care. The claim depends on that patience, not a miracle in a moment, but a long, stubborn nursing of conditions. And what is all this care supposed to bring forth? Not a medicine, not a shining stone, not some clever little trick in a jar. The promise is a homunculus, a tiny human thing made where no child should be made. Now, that is the uneasy heart of it. The recipe is trying to move human beginning out of the body and into method, warmth, matter, and patience. So this is where the whole strange promise lands. In the writing, life is no longer only a mystery hidden in flesh. It is treated as something you might gather, seal, warm, feed, and wait over. Matter first, then the vessel, then heat, then care. And if the account is believed, expectation itself becomes part of the recipe. That is the dream, small enough to fit in instructions and large enough to trouble the soul. Chapter 14. Life that seemed to appear by itself. Now hold that thought in your hand for a moment. A written claim says life might come from stuff, steps, warmth, and waiting. Strange, yes, but here is the better question. Strange to whom? Because people looked around and saw little lives appear where no mother, no egg, no nest could be found, in rot, in damp, in spoiled places. The world seemed to do this already. Now, you have to understand what that looked like. Meat was left too long, and first it only darkened, then it stank, then it softened, then suddenly it was crawling, damp scraps in a corner, mud after rain, grain in storage, cheese, cloth, old straw, all seemed to follow the same little pattern. Stillness, change, stink, softness, and then movement. And the smaller the creature, the stronger the trick became. A horse announced itself. A chicken had an egg, but flies, worms, mites, little white wrigglers in a rind of cheese, they slipped in below attention. Their beginnings were too small, their parents too quick, their hiding places too many. So when they finally appeared, all at once and everywhere, the meat or mud did not look like a stage. It looked like the mother. And this was not only about little bodies appearing. The whole world seemed busy under its own skin. Fruit sat in warmth and turned sharp. Dough swelled in the dark. A corpse changed without asking permission. Puddles grew a skin. After rain, damp soil looked richer, thicker, almost awake. Warmth, moisture, enclosure, darkness, time. Not variables, just the old recipe matter seemed to know by heart. So people learned the pattern by smell and touch. Put something warm, wet, shut away, left in the dark, and wait. That was the little recipe, not written down, maybe, but known. First came the sourness, then the swelling, then the stink, then, suddenly, movement. And once you had seen that happen enough times, dead stuff did not feel completely dead anymore. Now you have to feel what that did to the imagination. Matter did not seem to jump from dead to alive. It seemed to climb. First still, then soft, then sour, swollen, rotting. Then, in that mess, a twitch, a crawl, a little body finding its way out, so life could look less like a miracle dropped from above, and more like something nature coaxed up, step by step. And that is the little turn right there. If nature could do this by leaving matter to stew in the right way, then maybe a careful person could help it along, not make life from nothing. No, that would sound grander than they meant. The hope was simpler and stranger. Find the proper mixture, the proper warmth, the proper waiting, and borrow nature's trick. So no, this did not prove that anyone could bottle up life and pour it where they pleased, but it explains why the wish could keep moving. If dead flesh, mud, damp grain, and kitchen refuse all seemed to loosen into living bodies, then the wall was not a wall at all. It was a threshold, and once people believed that, the old workshop dream could walk into natural inquiry wearing cleaner clothes. Chapter 15. The body becomes a machine. Now carry that feeling with you just a little further. If life could seem to seep out of earth and meat and damp corners, then the next question was not only, where does life start? It was this: what is a living body doing, quietly, under the skin? Maybe the mystery was not a spark at all. Maybe it was a set of hidden workings, ticking away where no one could see. So the question began to shrink, in a useful way, not, what secret thing makes the whole body alive? But, what is this part doing? Watch the heart. Watch the lungs. Watch a valve open, a tube carry, a muscle pull. Now, you have to understand, that sounds modest, almost too modest, but it changed the room. Life could be chased part by part, action by action. And once you start watching that closely, something else appears. A push here can matter over there. A squeeze can drive fluid forward. A little flap can stop it coming back. One tiny motion can call up another, then another, like knuckles tapping down a table. Now, no one has made the creature into a clock yet, but inside the body, pressure has begun to speak. So a new picture comes into view. Not a hidden captain shouting orders from some dark little room, but roots. A touch at the skin, a strain in a cord, a disturbance traveling inward, finding a path, setting off a reply. The body begins to look less like a mystery of commands, and more like a place where messages move, arrive, and make things happen. Then Descartes steps in and gives that thought a sharper edge. Suppose an animal body is not a little haunted box, but a machine, not a crude machine, mind you, a wonderful one. Springs, tubes, valves, heat, pressure, all arranged so carefully that motion answers motion. The creature can still look astonishing. That is the trick. Its complexity does not vanish. It becomes something parts might build. And once you let yourself think that way, a tempting little door opens. Maybe the trouble is not that the body is impossible to understand. Maybe we have been staring at too much of it at once. So take it apart in thought. Give each piece a job. Ask what this pulls, what that carries, what this opens. Then put the pieces back together and see if the mystery has started to loosen. But here is the important turn. You do not explain the creature by naming the pieces, like a child emptying a pocket onto the table. Bone, nerve, heart, lung. Fine. But what does each one do to the next? What starts a motion? What carries it on? What keeps the chain from breaking? Now the body is not a lump with life poured into it. It is a running pattern. And that is the promise, isn't it? Not that life has become small, not that the wonder has gone out of it. No, the wonder is still there, breathing right in front of you, but now it can be approached. A pull here, a pressure there, a signal passing on. Piece by piece, relation by relation, the body begins to look learnable. Chapter 16. Opening the Human Map. So now we stop talking at the doorway. Literally. There is the room, and there is the body. Not an idea of a body, not a clever little machine in the mind. A real human frame, open for looking. And once you step in, every old claim has to answer to what is there on the table. You can point, you can name, you can be wrong. So the old books come in with them. Of course they do. A teacher has his names, his diagrams, his trusted sentences from men long dead. The students have copied them down like law. But now, look, the body is right there. If the page says one thing and the opened flesh says another, which one has to bend? That is the new rule in the room. And then the mystery starts coming apart. Not solved all at once, no, sorted. Here is skin pulled back from what it covered. Here is muscle, red and stubborn, running in its own direction. Here are pale cords of tissue, little roads of vessels, organs tucked in their places, bone holding the whole argument steady. Now the body is not one secret, it is a map. And this is where the room changes. Not because someone gives a clever speech, because a finger can stop above a thing and say, there. The book names this vessel one way, but the body shows it another. The teacher leans in, the students lean in. Everyone can see the same stubborn fact. Correction is no longer disrespect. It is obedience to what is open in front of them. Now you have to understand, seeing is only the beginning. The hand has to work. It cuts a little farther, lifts what lies in the way, follows a cord until it disappears, turns a part over and finds the hidden side. That is the change. Knowledge is no longer floating above the table in someone else's voice. It is made here, by touch, by looking again. So someone marks it down. Not just the name, mind you, the place. This lies above that. This little branch runs into that larger one. This pale cord is not the same as the darker vessel beside it. Now the body has a geography, a way to be pointed to again. And because it is a map, someone later can come back, look closer, and change it. And then comes the picture. Not a pretty extra, no. A second kind of keeping. The cut body cannot stay open forever. The room empties. The lesson ends. But the drawing carries the arrangement away. Muscle beside bone. Organ under rib. Vessel crossing vessel. Someone who was never there can study it, point to it, question it. That is how one opened body travels. And that is the turn right there. The body is no longer only something handed down in old sayings and trusted lists. It can be opened, it can be named, it can be drawn, and then, wonderfully, dangerously, it can be checked. If the eye finds a crossing where the book promised none, the map must bend, not the body, the map. Chapter 17. The Heart's Round Trip. So now we begin where the old room seems most certain. The body is open. There is the liver, there the lungs. A vessel can be followed with a finger. The heart can be lifted out in the mind and given pride of place. But listen closely. Naming a thing is not yet knowing what it does. These parts are not little treasures on a table. They are caught in action. Now watch the heart when it is not just a prize laid open for naming. Watch it move. It tightens, then loosens. Tightens, then loosens. The vessels nearby answer too, swelling a little, falling back, as if the whole thing is keeping time. And suddenly the better question changes. Not, what is this piece called? But, what is this motion doing? Again and again. So Harvey looks closer, not at the names now, but at the little doors. In the veins there are valves. In the heart, more of them. And these doors are fussy. Press blood one way, they open. Try to push it back, and they shut. Now that matters, because if the body were only sloshing blood here and there, why build doors that argue so firmly with return? Now, you have to understand, this changes the heart completely. It is not just sitting there, warm and important, like some little throne for the soul. When it squeezes, it drives blood out. It throws it with force into the arteries. That beat is work, real work, a push, a shove. The heart is not only alive in the body, it is making the body move inside itself. So Harvey starts counting, not once, not as a clever guess, but again and again. How much blood leaves with one squeeze? How many squeezes in a minute? Now multiply that out, and the old story begins to groan. If blood were merely spent and replaced, the body would need to make rivers of it, constantly, impossibly, every hour. Measurement has trapped the belief in a corner. And that is the turn. If so much blood is being thrown out, minute after minute, then it cannot simply vanish into the flesh and be replaced. No body could keep up with that. So the blood must be coming back. Somehow. There has to be a road home, from the far parts back toward the heart, so the same blood can be used again. Now the pieces click together. The heart pushes, the arteries carry blood outward. The valves, those little one-way doors, keep it from wandering backward, and the veins bring it home. Not a heap of named parts, no, a route, a loop, traffic moving through the body and returning again, hidden motion made visible by watching, counting, tracing. The body has become a system, and once you see that, the body is no longer just a place to label. It is not a map of parts sitting still on a page. It is work, pulse after pulse, push, return, push again. Now you can test it, you can follow it, you can ask, where does this motion go, and what keeps it moving? Harvey gives the body a new kind of truth, motion explained. Chapter 18. A New World in a Drop. So the question shrinks. Not the heart now, not the great rush of blood, but the tiny places where life seems to begin. Seeds, eggs, semen, a shaving of tissue, thin as breath, pond water, held up to a better lens. And now, you have to understand, they are not just looking, they are hunting for a clue. The beginning is still hidden, but hidden smaller. Then the lens catches a drop of water, and the blankness breaks open. There, in that little clear world, specks dart. They turn, they pause, as if choosing, then hurry on again. Some seem to feed, some twist away. Now you have to understand, this is just pond water to the naked eye, but under glass it is crowded, alive, busy with motion no one had been able to trust before. So they try the same trick with semen, and there too, under the lens, something moves. Tiny bodies, whipping and pressing forward, restless as sparks in a draft. Now you have to understand, no one can yet say what they are. Are they creatures, seeds, messengers? The egg still waits with its own strong claim, but the beginning has been pushed again, down into things no bare eye can see. Now they turn to seeds, those dry little knots you can hold between two fingers. Put one in soil, give it water, and out comes a root, then a stem, then leaves, each part arriving as if it knew where to go. So the question starts to whisper, was the plant somehow folded there already, waiting in a hidden order too small for ordinary sight? And then there is the egg, not a seed, not those darting things in semen, but something you can point to, a little sealed world, a round beginning. Now, you have to understand, that makes it powerful in the imagination. If a chick can come from this, maybe the first sketch is tucked inside it too. Not proved, not solved, just moved deeper under the shell into hidden order. So one answer begins to take shape. Maybe the creature is already there, only tiny, folded in the egg, packed in the seed, hidden in that little living body under the lens. Growth then is not making a new thing from nothing. It is opening, swelling, unfolding. And when the glass shows layers, membranes, vessels, strange textures, the mystery is not gone. It has simply slipped smaller than the naked eye can follow. But look a little longer, and the neat answer starts to wobble. Because under the glass, you do not simply find a tiny finished body waiting politely to grow. You find tissues, layers, membranes like wet curtains, vessels branching through soft matter, textures that seem to be arranging themselves. So maybe life is not only unfolding a packed creature, maybe parts are learning their places. The beginning is still hidden, yes, but now it is hidden inside structure itself. And that is where the glass leaves us, not with an answer tied up neatly, no, with a smaller door, seeds, eggs, semen, tissues, tiny swimmers in a drop of fluid, each seem to whisper, here, look here. Life's beginning felt closer than ever, almost touchable. But every time the lens sharpened, the question slipped downward, into structures ordinary eyes could never reach. Chapter 19. The Jars That Would Not Settle the Argument. Now, take something anyone could see, a scrap of meat left in the open. Day by day it darkens, softens, begins to stink. And then there they are, pale little maggots, wriggling where no life seemed to be before. The jar is open. Flies can land on it, crawl over it, leave again. But to watching eyes, the meat itself looks busy, almost fertile. So now comes the little trick. Put the same meat in another jar, but cover it with fine cloth. Air can still pass through. The meat is still there, still darkening, still doing everything rotten meat does. But the flies cannot touch it, and watch what changes. No wriggling crowd appears on the flesh. Suddenly the meat looks less like a birthplace, and the visitors look much more suspicious. And that changes the whole story, doesn't it? Not magic meat, not dead flesh waking up, just flies doing what flies do, leaving tiny eggs behind, too small or too easy to miss. Then the eggs hatch, and suddenly people think the meat has made life. Now, this does not answer where life first came from, not even close, but it does make one famous miracle look like ordinary reproduction, hiding in plain sight. But the old idea was not finished. It only slipped out of sight, because once people began boiling little soups and plant infusions, then leaving them alone, something strange happened. The liquid turned cloudy. Tiny living specks appeared, too small to follow like flies, too small to catch laying eggs. And now the question had a new hiding place, not rotten meat, but warm broth in a glass. Then John Needham steps in with a result that looked hard to dodge. He took rich broths, the sort of liquid tiny life seemed to love, and heated them, boiled them, or nearly so. Then he sealed the flasks away, and after a while there it was again. Cloudiness, little specks, movement. Now to Needham that mattered. Heat had killed what was there, yet life returned. So maybe matter itself could be stirred into life by some hidden living force. Then Spallanzani says, wait, try it again, but be stricter. Boil the broth longer, seal the glass more carefully, so nothing sneaks in afterward. And now, listen to the turn. The broth stays clear. No swarm, no cloud, no busy little specks. Maybe Needham had not killed everything. Maybe the seal had leaked. The miracle was starting to look like a loose lid. But that loose lid had its own answer, because critics could say, hold on, maybe the closed flask is exactly the problem. Maybe fresh air is not just empty space. Maybe it carries some active principle, some breath that matter needs before life can appear. Seal the vessel too well, and of course nothing happens. You have not disproved spontaneous generation. You have starved it of its condition. So by the years before 1818, the old claim was still standing, but it was wobbling. That matters. The jars and flasks had not solved the whole mystery, not yet, but they had done something sharper. They had made people look for hidden causes, demand cleaner trials, ask what air carried, and stop treating every speck of life in dead matter as an easy miracle. Chapter 20. Where did the bodies come from? Now the story turns, because knowing the body was no longer a rare public wonder, something one crowd might see once and talk about for years. It became a lesson, then another lesson, then a whole room of students, each needing to learn with their own eyes. And for that, you could not place an idea on the table. You needed a human body, a real one, and those were scarce. Now you have to understand, the law did not look around and say, doctors need bodies, so let us help them learn. No, the doorway was punishment. In Britain, only a narrow few could be handed over after death. Certain people already condemned to hang. After the execution, their bodies might be sent to the anatomists. That was the official channel. Small, grim, and nowhere near enough. And that changes the meaning of the table, doesn't it? This was not simply a body offered for learning. It was a body still being punished. The rope had done one part. The knife would do another. And for families, that mattered terribly. Burial was not a small kindness. It was the last dignity. To lose it was to have the sentence reach past death. So the law was not just solving a shortage. It was making a warning. Look what happens, it said. If you cross the final line, you do not only die, you may be opened, handled, kept from the grave your people wanted for you. And that fear did real work. It made the legal body useful to doctors, yes, but also marked it as something dreadful to touch. But here was the problem. Executions did not happen on a school timetable. A hanging might give the surgeons one body, maybe a few, and then nothing for weeks or months. Meanwhile, the lessons kept coming. Lecturers needed bodies to show. Students needed bodies to practice on. The same structures had to be found again and again. Anatomy needed repetition. The law gave it scraps. Now, you have to understand, this was no longer one curious doctor in a back room. It was schools. It was lecture halls. It was public showings where people paid to watch the hidden body explained. One more course meant one more body. One more lecturer meant another body. And a body once taught from was used up. Punishment could never feed that growing machine. So each lesson had a price. Not money first, though money was there. A body. One body opened on the table, And there were the muscles, there the nerves, there the organs and vessels at last made plain, but plain for a moment only. The more they learned, the more the body was spent. Then it was gone, and the next class still needed to see. And there it is, the strange little knot at the center of it all. Anatomy was trying to study life, honestly and closely, but it had made itself dependent on the dead, not just once, again and again. The lawful supply was still thin, still guarded, still tied to punishment, but the demand had learned to march, class after class, table after table. Chapter 21. The Night Work in the Churchyard. So the question became very simple and very dangerous. If the law could not fill the tables, what could? The teacher looked at the room. The students looked at the empty boards, and outside, not far away, the city kept burying its dead, fresh graves, soft earth, names still wet in memory. Now, you have to understand, that is where official medicine began to look without saying it was looking. Timing was everything. A grave did not stay useful for long. The newest ones gave themselves away, if you knew how to look. A raised mound, loose, dark soil, flowers not yet wilted, footprints from family still coming and going. That meant sorrow was fresh, yes, but it also meant the body was fresh. And for an anatomy room, that made all the difference. And that is when the night workers entered the story. People called them resurrection men, which sounds almost holy, doesn't it? It was not. They came after dark with shovels, carts, and quick hands. They were not there to weep. They were there to supply. A fresh grave became a price, a risk, a doorway from the churchyard back to the anatomy school. Now, here is the strange little trick of it. They learned not to rob the grave in the usual sense. A coat could be stolen. A ring could be stolen. Coffin handles, plates, even a shroud could bring a cleaner charge. So the careful men left those things behind. They wanted the one thing the law handled badly, the body itself. Now, you have to understand the gap they were slipping through. The law knew what to do with stolen shoes, stolen silver, stolen cloth, but a dead body sat in a stranger place. It was not quite property, not in the ordinary way. So if the shroud stayed, and the rings stayed, what exactly had been stolen? Everyone knew the answer in their bones. The court had trouble saying it. So people answered in the language the law could not quite speak. They kept watch. A brother might sit beside the fresh mound all night. A parish might lock the burial ground, or set a little shelter where a guard could stamp his feet against the cold. Over some graves came iron cages. Over others, slabs too heavy for quick hands. The churchyard was becoming a defended place. And that is why the watch mattered. Not because the graveyard was the end of the story, but because it had become the beginning of one. A fresh body, lifted quickly, moved quietly, was worth something only if it arrived in time. Before decay spoiled the bargain, before daylight raised questions. The path ran from mound to cart to back door, and there it ended, at the dissecting table. So the churchyard changed, quietly but completely. It was still holy ground, still the place where families came to leave their dead in peace. But at night, under that same wall, another meaning took hold. A grave could be a door, a body could be taken back out, and the old question, how does life work, had found its darkest road into the earth. Chapter 22. Not Dead Yet. Now picture the first one pulled from the water. Not long dead, perhaps, or perhaps not dead at all. That was the terrible puzzle. The body lay cold, still, silent, with no breath anyone could see, and the people on the bank had to choose. Right there. Were they standing beside a corpse or beside a life that had slipped just out of reach? Now, you have to understand, this changed the question. A drowned person was no longer just a sorrow carried home by one family. In the city, doctors and wealthy reformers began making plans. They paid people to pull bodies from the water. They printed plain instructions. They told neighbors, watchmen, boatmen, try. Do not just stand there. The almost dead had become everybody's business. So they built places for that try. Small receiving houses near the river, stores with blankets, bellows, warming pans, whatever might coax breath back into a quiet chest. And they named people to be ready, not someday, not after a doctor wandered by, but at once. Bring the body here, lay it down here, begin here. The bank itself had learned to answer, and the plainest answer was breath. If the chest would not rise, make it rise. That was the thought, simple enough to sound almost rude. Some rescuers used bellows, pushing air through a tube into the mouth or nose. Others were told to breathe for the person themselves, mouth to mouth. Recommendations changed. The purpose did not. Get air inside. Challenge the stillness directly. But breath was only the first argument. Cold skin made people hesitate. Yes, but it did not settle the matter. Not anymore. So they wrapped the drowned in blankets. They stripped away wet clothes and rubbed the limbs hard. They laid bodies in heated beds, near the fire, anywhere warmth could be pushed back in. Cold, they decided, might be a door, not a wall. Then came the little provocations. Now, you have to understand, they were listening to the body like a locked room. They rubbed harder. They shifted the head, turned the body, pressed and waited. They tried sharp smells, bitter stimulants, anything that might tug life back toward the surface. A cough would matter, a twitch would matter. One faint gasp, and the case was open again. And once people accepted that, the fear escaped the riverbank. Because if a drowned body could fool you, what about any quiet body, any still one? So families waited. Towns built rooms where the dead could lie a little longer. Bills were tied to strings, strings to fingers, just in case. Now you have to understand, this was not superstition alone. It was doubt, made practical. So the line was no longer clean. That was the trouble. A body could be cold, quiet, empty of breath, and still leave one terrible question hanging in the room. Is this death, or only a deep pause? Now, you have to understand, that question changes everything. It makes the still body something to watch, to test, to wait beside. Not gone beyond reach, not always. Chapter 23. Catching the Invisible Fire. Then someone rubs a piece of amber on cloth, sets it down, and waits. Nothing moves. No breath, no wheel, no hidden hand, and yet bring near a shred of straw, a fleck of paper, a bit of chaff, and watch it jump. Now you have to understand, that little leap was unsettling. The thing sat silent, but the room had seen it act. So Gilbert does something simple and powerful. He stops treating each little twitch as a parlor oddity. Amber, rubbed and woken, has a family resemblance to other things that tug at light scraps. He gives that family a name, drawn from amber itself, electric, not the lodestone's pull, not ordinary magnetism, something else, a separate kind of hidden reach, now ready to be argued over. And then comes the troubling part. The tug does not always stay where you made it. Touch the awakened thing to another body, or bring another surface close, and suddenly the little scraps answer over there too. Not at the amber, not at the place where the rubbing happened. Somewhere else? Now that is a dangerous thought, because if the force can move, perhaps a person can learn to carry it. Gray starts asking the practical question, not, what is this strange force? Not yet. First, where will it go? He tries thread, wire, wood, glass, anything at hand. And now you have to understand, the answer is not the same. Some things pass the little power onward. Some simply stop it cold. So electricity becomes a route to be chosen, a path to be made. So Gray begins to make a kind of road, a thread hung in the air, a wire stretched across a room, a line of people, hand to hand, waiting. Then the rubbed glass is touched at one end, and there it is, that tiny snap, that pull, that answering jump, appearing at the other, not everywhere, not by magic, along the chosen path. And then comes the clever little trick, a jar. Just a jar, it seems, with metal and water and a hand nearby. But feed charge into it, bit by bit, and the invisible thing stays there, waiting. Not forever, not safely, if you are careless. Touch it the right way, and it gives back everything at once, in a sharp spark, a sudden shock you can command. Now Franklin looks up from the little jar and says, in effect, wait. What if that crack in the room and that white fire in the clouds are not cousins, not look-alikes, but the same thing, small here, enormous there, held in glass here, raging across the sky there? The hidden spark has stepped outside the cabinet. It belongs to nature itself. So here is the new candidate, right in our hands, electricity. You can wake it by rubbing matter. You can give it a name. You can lead it down one path and keep it from another. You can bottle it in glass, carry it across a room, and let it leap out as a shock. And now, with Franklin, you can point to lightning and say, there, same hidden spark, only larger. Chapter 24. Put the spark through a body. And then comes the unsettling step. Once you can store the spark, once you can choose when it jumps, someone is going to ask the obvious question, what happens if it jumps through us? Not just a fingertip shock for a laugh, but a body placed in the path on purpose. Now electricity is not sitting in a jar anymore. It is being sent into flesh, managed, aimed, and watched. So the lecturers make a show of it. They line people up hand to hand, sometimes a whole room of them, all waiting with that nervous little smile. The machine is charged. The jar is ready. The lecturer pauses, because of course he does. Then contact. One snap, and the shock runs through the chain. Everyone jerks together, gasps together, laughs together, and the crowd thinks, there it is. The invisible thing has shown itself. And afterward, people start reaching for words. It was a prick, one says. No, more like a blow. Someone else feels heat spreading up the arm, then nothing at all. A queer numb place where the spark had passed. And notice that part. They do not see electricity. They feel it. They flinch before they can pretend not to. But then comes the part that makes the room go quieter. Not pain now. Movement. A hand flies open. A wrist snaps back. The corner of a mouth pulls tight before its owner has time to decide anything at all. Now, you have to understand, that is a different sort of wonder. Feeling a spark is one thing. Watching flesh answer it is another. So the game changes. The spark leaves the parlor trick and walks into the sick room. Doctors bring wires to arms that hang useless, to hands that will not close, to legs that have forgotten their old work. And there is hope there, real hope. If this force can make a healthy muscle jump, perhaps it can wake a silent one. Not cure, not yet. A question pressed to the skin, and the answers come back crooked. One patient says, yes, there, warmth, like a coal under the skin. Another feels pins and needles. A hand closes once, beautifully, then will not do it again. Someone swears they are better for a week. Someone else cries out and begs the doctor to stop. So electricity hangs there, you see, half remedy, half ordeal, powerful but not yet obedient. Then they try the same spark on flesh that cannot hope, a dead animal, still warm, a severed limb on the table. And there, with no prayer, no will, no pain, the muscles answer. A leg kicks, a jaw tightens, a paw curls, as if it means to hold something. Now you have to understand how that looked. Not life returning, worse maybe, life's gestures, borrowed for a moment by a spark. So by now, electricity has changed its name in people's minds. It is not just a parlor trick anymore, not just a little shock to make the room laugh. It can bite the nerves. It can tease a sick body with hope. It can make muscle answer when the person is gone. And that is the strange place they reach. Not life explained, no, but life imitated, close enough to make everyone lean in. Chapter 25. Why does dead muscle still move? And that is the question that begins to itch. If the person is no longer there to choose, then what exactly is moving? Touch the body, and it answers. Cut a nerve, and it answers. Send a shock through it, and still, somehow, it answers. Not with thought, not with wanting, just contraction. A plain little twitch, yes, but it separates two things people had kept tangled together, feeling and motion. So the doctors start making a little doorway in the problem. Not a grand answer yet, no, just a cleaner question. Can this part receive an impression? Can it feel in some bare bodily sense that something has touched it? And then a second question. Can this other part pull itself shorter, hard enough to make motion? Feeling over here, shortening over there. Keep that split in your hand. Now let muscle step forward, because this is where the trouble gets interesting. A nerve can claim it carries the message, yes, like a little road for command, but the muscle is not just dead rope waiting to be pulled. It has its own strange readiness. Touch it the right way, prick it, heat it, spark it, and it tightens. No permission, no thought, just flesh answering. But still, the nerve will not step aside, and you can see why. Nerves run like threads from far places back toward the middle. A finger feels heat, and somehow the body knows. A foot is hurt, and the message seems to travel inward. So yes, muscle can answer, but nerves look like the messengers, the wires, the little roads where command might pass. So the question changes. Not who gives the order, not yet. The sharper question is this. What wakes the answer? A prick can do it, a cut, a hard press of the thumb, a spark, quick as a snapped thread. No wish inside the tissue, no little decision. Still it jumps. And now stimulus becomes the dangerous word, because everyone can see the touch, but nobody can yet agree what carries its power. Now, you have to understand, this is where the room divides. One person says, the nerve is carrying something inside it, some fine bodily fluid, too thin to see, slipping along the path. Another says, no, the power comes from outside, like lightning finding a door. And beneath both guesses sits the same hard fact. Dead flesh still answers when touched. That is the trouble. The person is gone. No hearing, no wanting, no fear, no little spark of self looking out from behind the eyes. And yet, for a short while, parts of the body have not learned that lesson. Touch the right place, and a limb may answer. So now the dead body is not just a corpse, It is a question still moving at the edge of silence. So the argument needs a smaller stage, not a whole body, no, that is too heavy with grief and too full of guesses. It needs one plain piece of proof, a bit of muscle, a bit of nerve, laid bare enough to answer cleanly. No mind inside it, no wish, no drama, just the little jump that makes everyone lean closer. Chapter 26. Galvani's Twitching Frog. Now bring it into Galvani's room in Bologna. Not a theater, not a churchyard, just a workbench crowded with hooks, wires, blades, jars, and those bright little tools for chasing sparks. And there, among them, lie the frog legs, prepared and quiet. Dead, yes, but not dismissed. They have been moved from nature into experiment, waiting for the touch that will make the table hold its breath. Then comes the touch, a wire, a hook, the nerve caught just so, and suddenly the dead leg snaps, not drifts, not settles, snaps, the muscle pulls tight, as if some tiny order has run down the line and shouted, "Move." Now, that is the shock. The life is gone, yes, but the pathway still answers, nerve to muscle, command to motion. So Galvani does not leave it at wonder. He leans closer. What exactly answered? Not the whole leg, not some loose spark wandering through dead flesh. The nerve is touched, and the muscle obeys. That link is the thing. Nerve to muscle, again and again, like a little door with a handle. Find the handle, touch it properly, and the limb moves. Now Galvani has something better than a surprise. He has a trick he can do again. Change the metal, shift the touch, bring one point to the nerve and another to the muscle, and there it is. The leg pulls. Not every touch works. That matters. The arrangement matters. Metal, nerve, muscle, set just right, and the hidden force comes out on command. So he widens the circle. Bring in the electrical machine with its crackle and spark, and the frog answers. Let a storm charge the air, and again that small dead limb can jump. Now you have to understand, this does not solve the mystery. It makes it bigger. The metal may be the key in his hand, yes, but Galvani begins to suspect the room is already full of electricity, and the animal carries some of it inside. And here is Galvani's leap. The twitch is not just a sign that electricity touched the frog. No, he says, the frog has electricity of its own. The nerve and the muscle are like two charged sides, waiting. Connect them the right way, and the stored force rushes through. Motion? In 1791, he carries that claim into print, animal electricity. So this is the moment it leaves the bench. Galvani does not keep the twitch as a private wonder, tucked away among wires and hooks. In 1791, he publishes it. He says, plainly enough for the fight to begin, that muscle moves because living tissue holds its own electrical power, and that dead frog leg, quiet until touched, becomes his proof, a little body with a sleeping force inside, waiting for a path. And that is the picture Galvani leaves us with. Not a body brought back, not a soul returned, just a leg, dead and still, waiting in the quiet. Touch nerve to metal, close the path, and there it is again, a sudden kick. Now, you have to understand why that felt so strange. The force seemed to be inside the flesh, asleep until called. Chapter 27. Volta moves the spark outside. But once you see the kick, the next question will not leave you alone. Where did that little shock come from? Galvani says, from the flesh itself, from the nerve and muscle holding their own hidden charge. But look closely at the table. There is metal there. There is damp tissue. There are places where one thing touches another, and suddenly the frog is not the answer, it is the argument. So Volta does something very simple and very dangerous to Galvani's idea. He stops staring at the frog as if it holds the whole secret. He looks at the little pieces around it, the hooks, the wires, the damp places where metal touches flesh. Now the apparatus is no longer just helping the experiment speak, it may be speaking too. Volta says, wait, the force is not born inside the frog. It appears when two different metals meet, with something wet between them to carry the trouble along. Zinc and copper, silver and tin, it hardly matters. Touch them through moisture, and there is your little push. The frog moves because it has become a detector, not a battery. That is the sting in Volta's answer. But Galvani does not simply bow and step aside. No, he says, look closer. The body is not just a twitching signal bell for Volta's metals. Nerve and muscle have their own strange charge, their own stored readiness. The circuit may only be opening the gate, letting that hidden force show itself. So now every contact matters. Metal to metal, metal to nerve, nerve to muscle. So the quarrel becomes a tool. That is the lovely turn. They stop asking only, who is right? They start asking, what changed? Swap the zinc, move the copper, touch the nerve, then the muscle, then only the wet thread between them. Is the flesh making the force, carrying it, or merely announcing it? And there, piece by piece, the circuit begins to show its bones. Volta takes that question and makes it something you can hold. Not a frog on a table now, a stack. Zinc, then something wet, then copper, again. Zinc, wet cloth, copper, again and again, like a little tower built out of argument. Each layer repeats the same disputed touch, until the theory is no longer only an idea, it is a device. And now you have to understand what has just changed. This is not the old flash bright and gone before you can think. It is not one startled twitch from one poor bit of flesh. The pile keeps giving. Quietly, stubbornly, it keeps the action coming. So experimenters inherit two things at once, bodies that answer, and a machine that can keep asking. That is the handoff. That is the door opening. The frog's body has shown that dead flesh can still answer, and Volta's pile has shown that the asking does not have to stop after one spark. Now a person can press electricity into tissue, wait, change the strength, try again. Living matter, dead matter, steadily now, deliberately. The old question has become an instrument. Chapter 28. The dead man opens his eye. Into that new doorway steps Giovanni Aldini, not a quiet man in a corner, no. Aldini comes forward, carrying his uncle's argument in both hands. Luigi Galvani had been mocked, challenged, picked apart. So Aldini means to answer in the only language the crowd cannot easily dismiss. Watch the flesh, he says. Watch what it does when the force touches it, even after life is gone. And the body they choose has a name, George Foster. Remember that, because this is not some vague shape under a sheet. Foster has just been hanged at Newgate for murder. The law has finished with him. The crowd knows it. The doctors know it. Aldini knows it too. He is not calling a living man back from a faint. He is taking a dead, legally executed body into the room. So Aldini begins. He brings the metal points to Foster's face, to the mouth, the jaw, the muscles that should be finished forever. And now you have to understand, this is the test. Not talk, not theory. The current passes in, the dead flesh answers. A twitch first, then a tightening, then the first hard promise that this room is about to see much more. Then Aldini touches the head, and the room changes. Foster's jaw shifts, not gently, but with that awful little jerk that makes a dead face seem almost busy again. The lips pull, the cheeks tighten. Muscles that had no business answering anyone begin to answer the wire. And then, now listen, one eye appears to open, not life, not waking, but close enough to make every witness feel it. And Aldini keeps going. Another touch, another bite of current, and Foster's face is no longer the whole horror. The force runs down into the body, fingers draw in, the hands tighten, the arms pull with that hard, cramped strength you see in a machine, not a man. Now remember, he is still dead, but the body under the wire can clench like it means something. Then the whole body joins in. Not a hand now, not a cheek, but Foster's corpse bucking under the current, shoulders wrenching, legs kicking, the trunk snapping hard against the table. And you can feel the room lose its nerve, because this is no longer a lesson in anatomy. This is death, dragged out in public, made to twitch and struggle, while everyone knows no one has come back. And there it is, the thing people could not quite shake afterward. The current had made the dead body move. Not live, move. That difference is small in the mouth, but enormous in the room. A face can grimace, a hand can clutch, a chest can heave, and still Foster is gone. Electricity has found the body's strings, yes, but not the man. So when word of Newgate travels, it carries more than gossip. It carries a strange new permission. Those old stories, the corpse stirred in the grave, the dead thing made to answer, they no longer sound quite so far away. Not because Foster returned. He did not. But because people had seen dead flesh obey a force right there beside the gallows, among wires, hooks, and the tools of execution. Chapter 29. The Summer the Old Dream found Mary Shelley. Now carry that feeling forward to 1816, to the edge of Lake Geneva. Mary Shelley is there with Percy Shelley, Byron, Claire Clairmont, and young Polidori, shut indoors by miserable weather and restless talk. They read ghost stories together, the German kind, full of graves, bargains, and things that should stay dead. And in that room, old terrors stop being village whispers. They become company. And now you have to understand, Mary is not sitting in an empty room waiting for lightning to strike. The room is already crowded, not with people, though there are plenty of those, but with stories. German tales in translation, continental ghost stories, lovers dragged back from death, sinister bargains, corpses that do not rest. They read them aloud, argue over them, laugh a little, shiver a little, and borrow their shapes. Then Byron, with the kind of mischief that changes literary history, makes the game harder. Enough reading other people's ghosts. Everyone should write one, their own supernatural tale. Simple, yes? Except Mary later remembers the opposite. She listens, she tries, she waits for some dreadful subject to rise, and nothing comes. The room is full of monsters, but hers has not yet shown its face. And here the game shifts, because after the ghost stories come the conversations. Byron and Percy begin talking about life itself, not just souls, not just spirits, but the strange spark that makes a body more than matter. Could that principle be found? Could science touch it? Could dead flesh, under the right force, tremble again? Now, no single experiment hands Mary her monster, but listen, the old fear has learned a new language. So be careful here. We can name the weather, but not pretend we saw the lightning strike. Erasmus Darwin was in the air. Galvanic experiments were in the air. German talk about nerves, bodies, and hidden life was in the air too. Mary later tied those conversations to that world of ideas. That matters, but it is climate, not a receipt. Influence, yes. A single cause, no. And this is the image Mary later gives us. Not a transcript of the night, mind you, a memory shaped years afterward. She says she lay awake, unable to sleep, and saw him, a pale student of unhallowed arts, kneeling beside the thing he had pieced together. Then the awful hinge of it, the thing stirs, it breathes, made flesh begins to live. Now, that is why this was not just another ghost at the bedside. In the 1818 preface, the fright has a sharper hook. What if this could almost be true? Not true, no, but thinkable. Old dreams of maid servants and forbidden knowledge had met opened bodies, stolen corpses, doubtful death, and twitching flesh. In Mary's mind, the old terror found modern hands. So Mary stands at the crossing, you see, not because one road led straight to her door, but because so many roads had been moving that way. The dream of a maid servant, the dare of forbidden study, the opened body, the stolen grave, the not quite dead, the scaffold crowd, the twitch under the spark. And there, in one young writer's mind, the old wish speaks again. Live. Chapter 30. The Modern Prometheus Wakes. Then, in 1818, the book arrives, Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. Hear that title carefully. It gives us a new story, yes, but also an old trespass. A human maker reaches upward toward fire that was never meant for human hands. And all those scattered fascinations gather there, tight as a fist. Not can life be made, but what is owed when it is. Now, Victor does not invent that hunger from nothing. He inherits it. The old wish for a tireless helper is there. So is the darker wish to order flesh around like clay. Prometheus is there, and the alchemist too, whispering that matter might obey, if only you learned the right secret. But none of this is a recipe. It is a crowd behind him, pressing forward. Because Victor's world is not just books and forbidden wishes. It is tables, knives, lecture rooms, bodies opened so students can learn their secrets. It is graveyards watched with nervous eyes, collections of bone and tissue, jars on shelves. And then comes that crackle of experiment, the awful hint that a dead limb might still twitch if touched the right way. So the old dream steps closer, too close. And then Shelley does something very clever. She shuts the door. Victor will tell us that he found the secret. Yes, he will tell us the room, the instruments, the terrible work. But the exact trick? No, that stays hidden. So the book never becomes a set of instructions. It feels possible, almost scientific, but what matters is not how he did it. What matters is what he owes the life he made. And then it happens. The work breathes. It looks back. And listen, this is the turn. Victor wanted a triumph, maybe even a servant of his genius. What he gets is someone. A life that sees, that trembles, that reaches toward him needing an answer. Not a machine, not a prize, not a thing he can set down and walk away from. Now the real terror begins to speak. He learns the world, little by little. He hears language and reaches for it. He remembers doors shut in his face, hands raised against him, the ache of being alone. And then he compares. Other people have names, families, welcome. He has Victor. So his question becomes simple and terrible. Why make me, then leave me? So the old question slips out of Victor's hands. It is not, can you make a life? Shelley almost hides the how, like she is waving us past the laboratory door. The harder thing is here, in the open. Once that life looks back, what do you owe it? A name, a place, care, some kind of companion. Victor wanted creation without answer, and that vacancy is the horror. And that is why Frankenstein still lands. It is not a lightning trick, not a monster popping out of nowhere. It is an old wish, older than books, meeting a new age that can almost touch it. That is the shiver. The paths finally meet, and the question changes. Not can we make life, but if we do, what does that life have the right to demand from us?